This week has an underworld flavour, not as doom and gloom, but like a part of life where we're absolutely done with pretense, either within ourselves or out in the world. Power dynamics will be rising to the surface, and our desire will tell the truth. Control will become visible, and what has been quietly shaping things from underneath, for good or for ill, will be named. I want to frame this week's astrology through one of our oldest descent myths that we have, and it's Inanna's descent to the underworld, because astrologically we're watching a sequence of conjunctions to Pluto, Lord of the underworld, in early Aquarius, and it's a picture of each planet taking a turn to walk through a gate into the underworld. In the Sumerian story, Inanna decides to descend. The text literally says that she abandoned heaven and abandoned earth to go to the deepest earth. So she tells the gatekeeper that she's going down for the funeral rites, specifically for Gugalana, the husband of her sister Ereshkigal, who was the queen of the underworld. So the descent begins with grief and ritual and the reality of death, and also with a deeper motive underneath, the restoration of balance, the return of fertility, and the renewal of life through sacrifice and exchange. And here's the part that always gets to me of this myth. As she goes through seven gates, at each gate she's stripped naked, literally, but not just of her jewelry and symbols, but of functions, of status, protection, and leverage. By the end, she's brought low and rendered powerless until she becomes like a corpse hung on a hook in the underworld. And then, even when she's revived, she can't simply return unchanged. There's an exchange, a cost, and there's a demand for balance. This is the tone of this week: surrender and reckoning as a mechanism of renewal. Hello, welcome to Soul Symbols. My name's Karen, and you're all so welcome here. Thank you for joining us. So, this week, Venus, Mercury, and the Sun will all conjoin Pluto conjunction. Later this week, Mars will ingress Aquarius, but immediately will be applying to his conjunction with Pluto. Now, the conjunctions are all happening at 3 degrees of Aquarius. The Hellenistic texture of the third degree is that it's in Mercury's bounds, so that's 0 to 7 minutes of Aquarius, and that belongs to Mercury. And also the Chaldean decans, the first decan of Aquarius between 0 and 10 degrees, belongs to Venus. It's Venus's domain. So the sky itself is already telling a story. The goddess Venus is stepping into the underworld, Pluto, Hades, inside Mercury's territory of speech. And Mercury is naming, he's contracting, oaths are being spoken, and negotiations. So it's perfect for the way that we're going to use Mercury as voice, command, language, and what happens when that's stripped away. And because it's Aquarius, it's Saturn's domain. So we have that feel of cold, sober, structural, and long view here. It's not something that's going to happen this week and be all over. It's got longevity to this process unfolding. It happens this week and next, but there's longevity. Aquarius is that fixed air, so the ideas are not just, passing through or flickering away. They actually become systems of thinking, systems of being, systems of doing. It's a sign of the collective, Aquarius, the network, the people, but also the laws and architectures that shape what people can do. So when Pluto is here, we're not only talking personal shadow work, although we all need to do that, we're talking power in systems, organizations, communities. So leadership structures and cultural movements. And Aquarius, it's technology and ideology. It's how power is flowing through the collective body. I want to read a quote from the archetypal universe, Rem Butler, about Pluto, about the principles. It's so important. We can see what we're dealing with this week then. So it's processes of breakdown, disruption, and creation in the universe. It's impulses toward regeneration and transformation, purification and purging, profound evolutionary forces. And it can be brutal and ruthless behaviors, driving obsessive energies, and the underworld side of the psyche, volcanic feelings. So this is what we're dealing with, and the best way to deal with this is with self and other awareness, but also an awareness of the energies of this next couple of weeks, okay? And the best medicine is to bring laughter and joy to this intensity. So let's have a quick look at the chart. Here we have the beginning of the week, which is Monday, where I'm counting from. And we can see Venus here at 2 degrees applying conjunction. And that will be exact on the 20th of January. That's GMT time, okay? So I'm going to treat each of these conjunctions as gates to bring that myth through to what I'm saying, okay? And then the second conjunction is the Sun conjunct with Mercury at 1 degree of Aquarius. That's the Cazimi. And that will be happening on the 21st of January. All these are GMT. It's all UK time, Europe time, UK time. And then we have a gate 3, which is Mercury then moving on and conjuncting Pluto here, okay? So that is on the 22nd of January. And then 4th gate, we have the Sun in conjunction with Pluto. But also on that same day, we have Mars here ingressing to Aquarius. And that is on the 23rd of January. But Mars will not reach exact conjunction until, here we have it, the 27th of January. So it's the following week. Okay, so there's a flavour. So we are starting with Venus, okay, and then Mercury as the verbal expression, the voice, and how the mind names the underworld. The underworld is the place of the unconscious. It's the dream world. It's about power and wealth. That doesn't just mean monetary wealth, okay? It's of soul and death. It's a place that contains all them existential themes. So not light. It's not light for us, okay? And then we look at the Sun as sovereignty, meeting Pluto, and then Mars bringing the heat to the whole process. And finally, I'll briefly outline the themes and topics for each zodiac sign, which are being impacted by this stellium of planets passing through the underworld. There's timestamps below. So as I said, I'm going to look at this procession of planets as gates, the gates that Inanna passed through. And if you're interested in the myth of Inanna as a feminine initiation, there is this, you can see it's well thumbed, this very lovely book. And it's, as I say, it's about feminine initiation, but it gives you the whole story of Inanna. And I'll put the name there. And also, I will put the link for, if you're interested in and want to put a bit of flesh on the bones, I will put the link to the website, the ETCSL. Okay. It's basically a treasure trove of Sumerian literature, and you can read Inanna's kind of poem of descent there. Okay, that'll all be in the description box along with the timestamps. Okay, so gate one, Venus, Inanna, meeting Pluto, meeting Lord of the Underworld. So we could look at Venus meeting Pluto as desire meeting the underworld, our desire, okay? And think of those things I told you about what it's about. So it's that deep, intense passion, and sometimes it's taboo desires. But we also have here this blending of bonding, obsession, jealousy, fascination, compulsion. It's those things that magnetically pull us, powerfully magnetically pull us. But if we keep to the myth, this is Inanna choosing to descend. She wasn't dragged into the underworld against her will. She's choosing because she's willing to make the sacrifice that she needs to make in exchange for the return of the cycles of fertility and abundance. And she knew when she went in that she may not come out of the underworld. There's the law of the underworld is whoever goes into it does not return. Okay. So a question to be reflecting on as I go through this and then through the week is, where are you willingly going lower this week? Okay, it'll be different for each one of you. Just reflect on that question. So it's basically about, where are you done with the shallow version of any story, circumstance, done with being polite and saying, oh, it's fine, when it's not, done with that performing of harmony, because you want the real thing. You don't want facades. That's basically it. And Venus conjunct Pluto is also the mythical sacrifice and exchange motif. Okay, so that sacrifice and exchange motif you see coming up in a lot of the myths. Many things become the currency here. So we've got libido. If we go to the Jungian, look at the underworld, it's libido. So it's sexual desire, that life instinct here. And that becomes currency, as do attention, beauty and charm, and sex and loyalty becomes currency. And the underworld doesn't give a fig. It doesn't care about what we say we value. It's about revealing what we're actually willing to pay for. Okay. So on a personal level, to put it practically, you might feel magnetically drawn to someone or pulled into a dynamic that's not light, not casual. Okay, there's an intensity to this, and that might be healing and it might be messy, but it also might be both. Messily healing. Okay, but the medicine here is honesty. It's asking ourselves, what do I really want, and what am I trying to control here? What am I afraid to lose? Yeah, you may not be controlling or fearing, but it's worth asking yourselves those questions, because sometimes on the surface we don't feel we are, but deep down there is that desire to control, the fear of loss. As I said, we're talking about existential themes here, not just little light ones. Okay, so you can ask yourself those questions. The shadow expression of this is it shows up as passive aggression, of that triangulation in relationships where either you or someone else triangulates. Okay, if you don't know what that is, Google it. So much online about triangulation. It's often the tactic of narcissistic personality types, not necessarily, but it's a tactic. Okay, and it can show up as manipulation and power games in relationships, or the feeling within a relationship or any kind, not just romantic. I need you to prove it. I need you to prove you love me, or I need you to prove that you are what you say you are. It's that kind of energy. So your own desire becomes a kind of test. Okay, that's how it can show up. You may ask that, someone else may be asking that of you. And if we look at it, because Aquarius is collective, I'm going to go through the whole time looking at the collective lens here. And in the collective or leadership, Venus and Pluto can correlate with financial power, resource control, those loyalty economics, will help our allies and will destroy our non-allies. It can be pretty public relations or using beauty in public relations as leverage. And it can be moral language used to dominate. Um, we can think of many things. We've gone to this country and bombed it to allow the people to have democracy, okay, because we're good. Okay, it's that kind of thing. It can also show up as genuine regeneration, communities reforming around values that are actually lived and not just put online, the happy, wonderful values of Instagram sometimes. So it's here that spiritual community should pay special attention this week, because whatever we post online or we offer as a course must be something that we're living or willing to live, not something that pushes a brand by looking pretty, but that actually has spiritual wisdom gained from lived experience behind it. And that's because we're walking our talk, not just performing for leverage or to gain finances, clicks, likes, shares, or status and power for the self. Okay, it's got to be a heart thing if it's a spiritual thing. Okay, so that's a good thing, and it's something I'll be looking at this week, looking at because we have layers to us. We may not think we're doing something, but it might be there. Okay, so the question for any leader, spiritual or otherwise, this week is simple. Are you using love or community as a tool of control? Or are you willing to lose status to restore integrity? They're very, really revealing questions. So Mercury is gate 2. Mercury's the next, okay, but we're going to look at the Sun Mercury Cazimi as a voice stripped, okay? So in the myth, when Inanna reaches the gate, she's told not to argue the rights of the underworld, essentially, not to use her voice to override the process. And that is such a Mercury moment here. Yeah, that kind of picture in the myth is real mercurial. And then we get to Saturn. Oh, and then we get to that Sun conjunct Mercury, the Cazimi. Mercury in the heart of the Sun. And it's a moment where mind and message are purified. The signal gets really sharp here. We're going to have a sharpness to our thinking and to our hearing, which is good because we're dealing with the underworld and we can be dealing with ancestors, souls. It's on that level. So there's a sharpness to that signal. But this is the way I would formulate it in my mind, this gate, Kazemi. Your voice is very powerful this week, but that power is not about how loud you shout or how many times you post. Sometimes power is restraint, okay? That power can be the ability they call to meek a horse. That word meek. I think we're brought up as children in the West often as gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Meek is power under control. You meek a horse. Okay. So restraint gives freedom and power in a very different way. Sometimes it's not, we don't win by speaking. We win by speaking once, clearly, particularly in relationship, and then not negotiating our boundaries, particularly with our own fear, negotiating boundaries because we fear loss or whatever. And sometimes it is the silence that is incredibly powerful. That can be incredibly powerful. Practically, if you've been circling a conversation, this is the day to write the sentence you've been avoiding and actively express it to the person you want to communicate it to. Also, this is a good time to explore if you've been leaking energy by over explaining yourself, justifying your choices and your actions and boundaries. This is a day to choose clarity over persuasion. We don't have to persuade people of our right to speak and put our boundaries there, okay? So what about the collective? Within the collective, this Mercury Cazimi can bring announcements um, and pivots in the general narrative, the mainstream narrative. It can also bring revelation and messaging that resets the story. I'm going to be talking about that a bit further along. But if the story's being used to manipulate, if that narrative is manipulative, Pluto's waiting. So we're talking about Cazimi. We may see that come out of Cazimi, but don't think that's the end of it, because then Mercury is going to meet Pluto in the underworld. So that's the voice meeting the underworld. Okay. So when Mercury meets Pluto in that conjunction, it's, you can think of it like the mind going surgical with a scalpel. So it's interrogation, it's truth telling energy. We might see confessions, or going down a rabbit hole researching. Okay, be aware that you might want to research something, especially something kind of hidden or dark or taboo, and you might find yourself losing loads of time because you're going down a deep, deep rabbit hole cave. There'll be many leaks and obsessions, or the urge to say things you shouldn't say. So be conscious of that. It can become a kind of Tourette's where you're saying things that really shouldn't be. They're not thought through. They're from the brain to the mouth without any processing. So just be aware of that. There is a big energy for that. So this is also the place where language can become a weapon if we're not conscious. Okay, Mercury and Pluto gives the power to name what's actually happening, but it's wise to be aware that it can also tempt you to use that naming, that truth, as a form of domination. That's the nature of the archetypes we're dealing with. We may see truth about someone or a situation, maybe a secret, maybe we find out a secret that comes to light, but we see it very clearly here. And then we have the urge to use that knowledge or insight to have power over someone or something. Just be aware those temptations are there, and don't kid yourself that you're a good woman, a good man, a good whatever. And oh, I wouldn't do that, because that energy, that archetype is so powerful. It's a good time to ask yourself if you're seeking truth or seeking control, because they can sound identical in your head. Okay. Truth and control can be identical. Okay. Aim for clear expression. That's the best way to deal with it. And have those hard conversations with an awareness and a maturity, especially that awareness of using it as domination. Okay. If you're having or conducting, you're a therapist or you're receiving therapy, you might find during this period that it goes straight to the root of whatever issue you're discussing there. But we can also use this time to speak concisely about our boundaries without being cruel. Not, that's my boundary, bugger off, I never want to see you again. That would be a bit cruel. But we can speak concisely about where our limits are. The shadow expression can be a bad case of compulsive texting. Okay, verbal power plays or withholding information to maintain an advantage. We see our governments doing a lot of that, don't we? Let's withhold that because we don't want the people to know that, 'cause it could be harmful. No, it's for advantage. On the opposite side, it's like blurting things out like a grenade and then calling it honesty. So, well, I was just being honest, okay? And you're dropping something that leaves everyone devastated, okay? And again, don't judge yourself if you do that. Just be aware that the potential for that is there. We've all done it. Again, it's something we've all done in, one way or another, one explosion or another, okay? The collective, this could be whistleblowing energy. So it can be individuals and groups shedding light on mismanagement of resources and corruption, for instance. There's much more there can be whistleblowing about, but it is that energetic. It can also be propaganda wars. So be critical thinking and discerning about what you're hearing through governments, through media. Yeah, critical think. because it's a big propaganda war. And you can see the beginnings. I'm recording this on the 13th, the week before, 13th of January. But I can see this stirring already in terms of some of the stories that are coming out. If you check the sources and you listen to alternative takes on it, very different stories. So don't just jump in and believe it because the news anchor told you it. I'm sure you don't, but it's that kind of energy that can really drag us in. So weigh it, be discerning, be critically thinking. And it can be community splitting over who controls the narrative. And again, it's something we see repeatedly, but there's going to be an intensification of these things. But it can also be a necessary truth. So it can be the thing that has to be said so the whole system can regenerate. So that can look like a journalist speaking truth to power. Oh, wow, wouldn't that be lovely? Okay. Holding someone, and sorry, journalists, I'm not saying that that never happens, but it doesn't happen of a matter of course. And that's how journalists should be. They should be holding power to account. Um, so, yeah, holding someone publicly accountable for harmful actions, bringing hidden power dynamics to the surface to the collective's awareness. So we might be seeing some of that this week. And again, I've seen it. I've seen global leaders questioned in a way they haven't been questioned over the last 2 years by the mainstream media, which is hopeful. I don't know if you can hear that dog next door barking. Beautiful little Lottie. She's going berserk. Excuse that. So gate 4, we're talking the sun conjunct Pluto. So we're talking about the stripping of sovereignty here. The sun is connected with sovereignty and authority. So this is the center of the story, not just the astrological story, but the myth of Inanna. Inanna's descent includes the surrender of her functions, of her offices, and yeah, this is where the myth gets to me. It touches. She loses her status and her rule. Okay, she loses her sovereignty. Her gold ring is taken from her finger. Okay, and that is a sign of authority, divine favor, the goddess energy. When the sun joins Pluto, it's like the underworld putting a hand on a crown and saying, "Are you sure you deserve that?" And we need to look at that. We've got rulers like royalty and other rulers. A hand might be put on their heads, okay, to ask, are they deserving of this? And what with the secrets and everything coming out, we don't know what's going to transpire over the next few weeks. And this is intense enthusiasm and drive as well. Pluto in the sun. It can be we can have surges of creative potency and that primal energy, which is not always bad. It's life force, primal energy. But it's also our egos, the ego meeting the shadow, okay? So what does this look like for us as individuals? We're looking at where are we performing strength when the real strength would be to surrender? And where are we clinging to identity when the soul is trying to perform? Okay, our identity is very tied up with our ego. We need our ego, but we don't need it driving. I keep saying that. And it can stop the soul bringing about transformation because we cling on to our identity and our roles. The shadow of this is quite difficult. It can be ruthlessness, dominance, a sexual shadow, if we've got sexual shadow used for attention and control. Right? That's dark. That can be dark. That can be all sorts of dark things. And that vibe of, I'll show you. Do you remember that when you were a child? That still pops up. Our inner child still pops up and go, yeah, I'll show you. You think I can't do that? I'll show you. And that can get very, very theatrical. So I've got memories coming through my head here. So the medicine here is self-conquest, not the conquest of others. If we keep that power dynamic in our mind all the time over the next few weeks, we shouldn't go too far astray. It will keep us aware, okay, we're dealing with very strong power here. And if you're lead with accountability. Be accountable for what you put out there, what you're saying, your words. And if you're creating, create from the root, not from a need to prove that you're actually in this world, that you exist. Okay, so again, from the root, allow that sacral root, sacral chakra to bring up all that creative power that you've got within you. Work from the bottom up. And collectively, this is where it gets a little bit spicy. Okay, it's where leadership scandals can surface, and they've been, and this is could be the real boiling point here over the next couple of weeks. Not only can they surface, but power struggles can escalate. So shadow in the shadow of authority, power and authority is going to become visible. Now, intuitively, when I look at the astrology and various other things, I feel it's going to be dark truths and secrets, the things that have been repressed and hidden from the collective meeting the light of day during this period. So it can be taboo subject matters that will surface, which can shock and shake a society, okay? Including the misuse and abuse of power and wealth. And it'll be about all those things which have been hidden from the public. So it can be, you know, black projects that they call them, the aerospace, the military industrial complex. These things might come, especially with that whistleblower energy there may surface this week, but the other stuff, the taboo and abuse of power and wealth, I think stuff's going to come up that it's going to be shocking. Start emerging. The sun with Pluto can be a signification as well of the demise or death of a solar figure. That's another reason I think some of these things are going to come, because that will be the demise, the fall, the destruction of someone's ability to lead. So watch the news cycle with discernment. Watch for the propaganda. And it can also be, and this would be absolutely wonderful, particularly with some leaders, a moment a leader chooses humility and repairs trust with the people he or she is leading. So some Pluto is asking, is the authority life-giving, or is it extracting vitality and sovereignty from the collective? Okay, and they're really important. You know, with much power and responsibility comes much accountability. Okay. And I think leaders often, especially global leaders, often think they're far above accountability, taking responsibility for their actions. But I think the collective are calling for that now more and more. So Mars on this day as well would be entering Aquarius, ingress in Aquarius, and then applying to Pluto. Okay. So it's that sense of action being stripped, but action being reclaimed. So Mars is action, autonomy, fight, libido in motion. Okay. So with our mythic frame, Inanna's ability to act on her own behalf is stripped. As Mars heads straight for Pluto, this is where the week gets volcanic. So this is the end of the week and the following week. Okay, we're going to see volcanic things. Might see the build up this week, but where Mars and Pluto is cathartic and surgical, or you know, as in cutting away what is rotten, or it can be decisive action and courageous renewal, or this is the worrying part about it, especially when people with much power, wealth are cornered. It can become brutal and compulsive. So force, coercion, obsession, and that scorched earth. Yeah, as in the deliberate military destruction of resources and property of those, they turn enemy. Okay, so that's the worry of it. Okay, that's the worry, particularly if a leader's ability to lead is being questioned. So this is the part where we need to start speaking to our nervous systems, okay? Because the underworld week doesn't just happen out there. It happens in and through our bodies, as within, so without, and as without, so within. We are talking astrological, as above, so below. It's going to play out here. And what plays out on the earth has an effect on our body, and what's within us has an effect outside. So it's all interconnected. It's just one big nervous system, the whole universe and everything that goes on and everything in it. It's a big nervous system, okay? So if you notice things like getting addicted to the intensity, doom scrolling for the end of the world scenarios, or big like intense stories. If you're picking fights, if you know, yeah, and if you're seeking an enemy, because we can sometimes do this. So our adrenaline has somewhere to go. Just pause. Okay. Mars and Pluto is incredible power and it needs to be safely channeled. It needs a safe channel to flow through. Okay. So personally, this is where you can be empowered to break a compulsion and a cycle. It can be where you finally do the thing you've been circling for months, okay? The shadow can be absolute overexertion, pushing too hard, my way or the highway, having rage as an identity. I'm so angry about this. I'm so angry. Yeah, and it becomes part of who you are. And people go, oh no, here comes raging Roger. you know, and right, stop laughing. And sexual energy used like a battering ram, and interpret that as you will. Okay, okay. The collective lens, this can correlate with eruptions in group dynamics. So that protest energy, retaliation energy, again, worrisome in some ways. But it can be that people versus power things. Okay, and again, it can be liberation. Okay. But that liberation, it can be a new form of domination, posing as liberation. And we often see this with revolutionary leaders, don't we? Becoming the next conduit of tyranny. Oh, let's have a people power revelation and revelation and revolution. And then those leaders become the new tyranny. So Mars conjuncts Pluto exactly, which is like the last gate, and that is, I think it's the 27th. Yeah, it is. I've got the date here. 27th of January. And it's the final gate. Okay. And I've just spoken about the power of Mars Pluto and the potential for destruction or creation and renewal. But it's the last part. I'm looking at it in terms of the last part of the descent myth. And we need to take it seriously because it's the part where Inanna's body is on a hook, where the old self, the old identity, a status, a power can't negotiate anymore. It's where the underworld is saying something must die for something to live. So I'd close this gate with one central question. What are you willing to sacrifice that's actually worth sacrificing? Because sometimes we sacrifice the wrong thing. We can sacrifice our softness or our joy. And we definitely can sacrifice our health and our relationships. And the myth is clearer than you think. The descent is not about losing life, it's about restoring balance, restoring the circle, the cycle of life. It's about an energy exchange that leads to renewal. It is that myth motif of sacrifice and exchange, sacrifice for the greater good almost. So make that sacrifice conscious, okay? Don't sacrifice yourself through, dropping grenades and, I mean, word grenades, literal grenades if you're military. Right. So I think the best guidance that I've been given, and then I'm going to give to you, is to work with these energies of this week and next week consciously and intentionally. So there's 4 simple practices, 1 per gate. So Venus, Pluto, we're looking at desire and power. Okay. So one way to examine yourself, see where you're coming from, is ask yourself, where do I confuse love with control? And that can be love towards you or the love you're giving out. Okay. Then write one honest desire without dressing it up like a virtue. Okay. As something that is, don't dress it up as something that's seen as a quality that's morally good or desirable. Real honest desire. Okay. Second gate, Mercury, Kazemi, about your voice being purified. Choose one sentence you will say cleanly, directly this week. No over explaining, no defending, just truth plus a boundary. The third gate, Mercury and Pluto, truth with ethics. Okay. So before, this is a really hard one, okay? Because this is sometimes comes from that deep, dark place of passion. Okay. But before you speak, ask, am I saying this to heal or to win? Particularly if it's to your partner. If it's to win, or 24 hours, and I'm laughing because it's something I've done, yeah, I'm kidding myself that it's for healing, okay? And it's not, it's because I want to win. So we're funny creatures. That's all I can say. Okay. And the fourth one is Sun and Pluto, and then moving into Mars Pluto conjunctions. So it's sovereignty and action. So we can move our bodies. Sometimes that energy gets frozen, stuck, blocked in us. So just practical, move our bodies, do something that metabolizes all the intensity that's around. Okay, otherwise it will build like a great big volcano in you and explode out the top of your head, your mouth. Okay, so walk, do any kind of strength work. Not my bag, but your weightlifting. Okay, shake out. Yeah, shake it out, shake that energy out, dance, anything that real sense of powerful action, breath work as well. Yeah, you can do some of your Wim Hof breathing, your Stanislav Grof, that breathing. Okay, then decide after that what is one decisive action that creates renewal and not destruction. So yes, this is Pluto, a very Plutonian week, and then we'll carry on until next week. Power dynamics are at the fore. Seriously, power dynamics are at the fore. But you're not here to be swallowed by the underworld. You're here to meet it consciously. So let something false die to let something true rise. Okay, that's the exchange. And if you're in any kind of leadership at home, in family, at work, and we're all leading someone one way or another, this week is asking you to lead like a priest or a priestess at a threshold. Okay, so lead with integrity, restraint, and courage, and have a willingness to surrender the kind of power that was never yours to keep. So I speak directly to spiritual leaders there. Whatever power you have, it's not yours to keep. You're a conduit, a vessel, a channel of that. Okay, keep that in mind. And if you'd like, tell me in the comments, which gate are you feeling most strongly? That I've talked about the Venus, the Mercury, the Sun, or the Mars? Okay, let me know in the comments. Be interesting. So I'm going to do now a quick overview of all 12 signs and the themes. These will be quick, but they'll thoroughly show you the themes and topics that Pluto is bringing pressure to over this period, and it will be happening over a period of a couple of weeks, and Pluto will be there for 20 years. Okay, so this is the part of your chart that Pluto is doing his underworldy things too. Okay, timestamps are below in the description by us box. I'll see you there. Bye bye. Hello, Aries. So, Aquarius is your 11th house, and this is where the underworld will be pressing in your chart. So, the 11th house is friends, communities, your audience, collaborations, and causes. So, this week is asking you, what is the real power structure in your networks? Venus Pluto can intensify alliances. Mercury Pluto brings truth in group dynamics, and Sun Pluto tests leadership in community. And you can have the Mars Pluto that can trigger factional conflict or decisive collective action. So watch out for those themes, Aries. Hello, Taurus. So Aquarius is in your 10th house, and this is where the underworld is pressing in your chart. So this is to do with career, reputation, leadership, visibility. This is the throne room version. It's authority and shadow in public life. Mercury will be getting stripped here as messaging and communications. What you say will carry weight, particularly in the workplace. Mars and Pluto can bring a power move, a confrontation with a boss or a system of some sort, or the courage to claim a more honest role. Hello, Gemini. So Aquarius is your 9th house, and this is where the underworld will be pressing in your chart. So the 9th house is about beliefs, truth, education, publishing, travel, law, ethics, any of those things. Mercury and Pluto is huge here. A narrative may die and a deeper truth replacing it. And you may feel called to speak with more precision or stop speaking where it's performative and your heart's not there. Mars and Pluto can look like activism, debate, or taking a stand cleanly without crusade energy taking over. Hello, Cancer. Aquarius is your 8th house, and this is where the underworld will be pressing in your chart. So it's shared money, debts, intimacy, trust. It's the psychological underworld and taboos. This is the most literal descent, the 8th house. Venus, Pluto intensifies bonds and exposes power dynamics in intimacy or finances. Mercury, Pluto can bring disclosures and hard conversations. And the Sun, Pluto will be asking for sovereignty inside entanglements. Mars, Pluto can catalyze a breakup of a toxic tie or a brave renegotiation. Hello, Leo. Aquarius is your 7th house, and this is where the underworld will be pressing in your chart. So this is about relationship, partnerships, clients, open enemies, contracts. Venus, Pluto can bring a fated feeling in relationships, but also the shadow of control, jealousy, or triangulation. Mercury and Pluto is contract talk, what's actually being agreed. Sun and Pluto is authority testing, who leads, who yields, who's performing. Mars and Pluto can be a confrontation that clears the air or a power struggle if nobody wants to surrender pride. Hello, Virgo. Aquarius is in your 6th house, and this is where the underworld will be pressing in your chart. So 6th house is work, health, daily life. It's service, co-workers, and can be small animals. The underworld shows up in routines and systems. What's unsustainable, what's quietly draining you, what's been normalized. Mercury, Pluto is especially practical. It's a diagnosis, a redesign, a renegotiating workload. Sun and Pluto is sovereignty over time and energy. And Mars, Pluto can be a burnout warning or the push to change a work dynamic decisively. Hello, Libra. Aquarius is in your 5th house, and this is where the underworld is going to be pressing in your chart. So 5th house is creativity, romance, pleasure, children, the desire to be seen. It can also be about gambling and, anything you find pleasurable. Venus and Pluto can bring intense attraction and creative potency, but also the trap of performing brightness to maintain control. Mercury and Pluto is the truth behind the flirtation or the story. And Sun and Pluto asks, are you creating from your soul or from an ego hunger? Mars, Pluto can also unleash art, sex, passion, or drama if power games run the show. Hello, Scorpio. Aquarius is in your 4th house, and this is where the underworld will be pressing in your chart. It's on the angle, so you'll feel it quite intensely. So it's home, family, roots. It's the land. What's at the foundations of things? It can be your ancestry too. This is Underworld, at the base of life, family patterns, ancestral dynamics, the emotional house you live in. Mercury and Pluto is the conversation you've avoided at home. Sun Pluto is sovereignty in the private realm. Who sets the tone is the question there. Mars and Pluto can be a cleansing confrontation, a move, a boundary with family, or a decisive reset of your living situation. Hello, Sagittarius. Aquarius is in your third house, and this is where the underworld will be pressing in your chart. So third house is communication, siblings, neighbours, short travel, study, daily mind, daily routine. So Mercury and Pluto is the headline here. Words have consequences. The truth cuts and narrative shifts. Venus and Pluto can intensify social exchanges. Sun and Pluto test your voice and influence. Mars, Pluto can bring verbal conflict or the courage to finally say the thing that you haven't been able to say, ideally once, cleanly, without escalation. Hello, Capricorn. Aquarius is in your second house, and this is where the underworld will be pressing in your chart. So this is the house for money, income, possessions, self-worth, values. Venus, Pluto is value in its raw form, what you'll trade energy for and what you won't. Mercury, Pluto is financial truth and renegotiation. Sun and Pluto is sovereignty around worth. And Mars, Pluto can bring a decisive earning spending action, a boundary around resources, or a confrontation with the mindset of scarcity, that programming. Hello, Aquarius. This is in your first house. You have Pluto in your first house, and this is where the underworld will be pressing in your chart, but you would have felt it anyway, but particularly now. So this is about identity, body, presence, your whole interface with the world. This is your personal alchemy week. Venus, Pluto can change how you attract, bond and value yourself. Mercury and Pluto changes how you speak and think. Your voice can become sharper or you realise where you've given it away. Sun, Pluto is sovereignty and shadowing the self. And Mars, Pluto is embodied willpower. Use it to transform habits and not to prove dominance. Hello, Pisces. So Aquarius is in your 12th house, and this is where the underworld will be pressing. So it's your unconscious. It's grief, retreat, endings, can be hidden enemies. It's spiritual compost. This is the most Inanna in tone, the 12th house. It's surrender, release, the ego stepping back so that the deeper self can renew. Mercury and Pluto can bring inner revelations, dream messages, therapy breakthroughs. Sun and Pluto ask you for quiet sovereignty. And Mars, Pluto is the danger of self-undoing through compulsion, but also the power to cut an addiction, pattern, or end a hidden drain.